So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 78, which is a really great group chat that we just had with Ian Fliflet, who's the Chief Growth Officer at OfferUp. So OfferUp is a leading mobile-first marketplace for buying and selling items from others nearby. It's raised over $380 million in venture capital from some top funds like Andreessen Horowitz and is notably one of the fastest growing consumer marketplaces over the past few years. So this is a really great chat with Ian, where we got to learn more about OfferUp, how it's scaled to be a leading consumer marketplace, some growth insights that Ian shared with us, and had a great Q&A for those on the chat. So I really enjoyed it, and I know you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So Ian, welcome to the group chat, and it's definitely great to have you join us here today. So OfferUp is an incredible marketplace that many of us have not only heard of, but some of us have probably actually used ourselves. So I'm really excited to have you join us and learn more about it here. Before we jump into things, though, I think it'd be great if you can start off by sharing a little bit more on your background for those that don't know you.
You bet. So let's see. So I started working back when the first internet bubble was bursting in 2000, right out of college, where it was impossible to even get a full-time job anywhere. Things were a lot different back then. But I went to go work at a place called Real Networks, which was the company that invented streaming media. They had a software called the Real Player, which was on everybody's desktop computer around the world. Millions of downloads a day, literally. So that my first job was really cutting my teeth in terms of understanding high volume consumer software distribution. Worked on that for a little bit, and then we acquired a music subscription company called Rhapsody in 2003, which was interesting. Early on in music streaming, started to work on that. Started to learn about growth, figure out how that works, acquiring customers, CAC to LTV, cohort analysis, all of that kind of stuff that really became the basis of my growth philosophy and understanding going forward for digital businesses. I was lucky enough there to be exposed to a bunch of great leaders along the way. Worked for a few different folks. Worked for a guy named Adam Slipsky at one point, he runs AWS now. Worked for a friend of mine named Tim Wan, who's the CFO at Asana. Worked for a friend of mine who was the COO PopCap Games, a guy named Steve Mowry. I was working in corporate development for him. And then at the end of it, I was working for a guy named Matt Hewlett, who was the president of Rosetta Stone until recently, running a video games business. So I ended up being there a long time, 13 years, and getting good exposure to different parts of digital businesses, always on consumer. And at that point in time, 2013, I just got married, was looking to take a career risk, didn't want to stay at a company for that long. I was way past my time at that point, time to leave. So an early investor in OfferUp, a friend of mine named Andrew Wright, introduced me to Nick, who's the founder, one of the co-founders of OfferUp, the CEO. There were 4 people at OfferUp, and they were growing in Seattle, but hadn't grown much beyond that. And I spent a lot of time talking to them, learning about the business, seeing if there was a good combination of things that I could bring and add to what they already did really well, and took a flyer on it, and it worked out. So, you'd rather be lucky than good. So I took a calculated risk, but took a bet on my career at that point to try to work at some place that was small and be a part of building something from the ground up. So I've been lucky enough to be able to stick around at OfferUp for the last 8 years. Our chief growth officer today. But as you can imagine, being at a startup, you just pitch in along the way and kind of figure things out as you go. So I've been lucky enough to build out the marketing team, the growth team, business operations for us, which is basically a group of analysts, managers who work cross-functionally to help everybody understand the business. Done all the fundraising over the years up through our acquisition of LetGo, a big competitor who's owned by a big company called Naspers. And that was about a year and a half ago. I'm still on the C team today, working for a guy named Todd Dunlap, who was the former leader of Booking.com in the US. So that's been a blast. He's an amazing leader. So lots of stuff I'm happy to share from OfferUp's growth story along the way. It has not been a straight line, that's for sure. Lots of ups and downs, things, best of times and worst of times, as you can imagine. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, that's some pretty incredible experience. And yeah, there's definitely a lot I would like to jump into. So you mentioned that when you first joined OfferUp, though, it was a team of
Yeah.
4, right?
Yep.
And just for some context, what sense of scale are you at today?
Well, today we have over 20 million users a month on the apps. Back then we had about 500 a month. So big difference between then and now. So OfferUp's a local marketplace. So really those users, that's the sum total of unique users in different cities in the country. So what we really had to do was grow OfferUp on a city by city basis. Started off one at a time, then we would go two at a time as we developed, the quote unquote playbook to expand market by market, and then continue investment and growth in the markets as we got them going. So yeah, it's been fun. I think we have over 55 million users that use the app on an annual basis, about 20 million on a monthly basis.
Awesome. Yeah, that's quite an impressive sense of scale. So you actually did mention the, kind of playbook and being a localized marketplace for launching in new markets. So, kind of going back to the early days, could you kind of like walk us through what the initial kind of, I would say, growth was like for OfferUp, and then maybe some kind of, important points along the way as you scaled?
Yeah. So, when I look back in terms of what the circumstances were that allowed us to grow quickly, a lot of it was timing. We were growing a horizontal marketplace in 2013 and 2014 when the meme from the investment community was that you can't grow horizontally in the face of Craigslist. Verticals were getting funded, and we weren't. We did find people to back us. Jackson Square Ventures was an initial Series A investor. We used those early dollars to fund the product experience and testing on a marketing basis for user acquisition. So early on, even when I started, we had a CTO, a guy named Arjen van Beelen, who was maniacal about instrumenting the app and the experience to inform us as the managers of the business what customers were actually doing and experiencing on the app. Because as you know, early users, you need to get them in and they need to have a satisfying experience for a marketplace, particularly a two-sided marketplace. That means they have to either A, find something to buy, or if you're a seller, sell something successfully. So basically the playbook early on was to find users in cities that were highly likely to be a buyer or a seller, and then figure out how many of them you needed at any given point in time to get some level of critical mass where that successive new users could come on and have a satisfying experience, so that you wouldn't get the kind of the crickets, if you will, that happens when a marketplace is too small and there's not enough activity. So really what we were lucky because nobody else was doing what we were doing. And we were also lucky that Facebook had launched mobile advertising as an option. I had been leveraging Facebook as an advertising platform since they started. It was called the Facebook Canvas when it was just desktop in like 2007. But back then it was not like it is today, where everybody on the planet is using it to grow. Nobody was targeting locally on Facebook on mobile. So that was this greenfield for us. So we would go into a city, target the types of users that we would identify to be most likely to be buyers or sellers, and then dedicate a certain amount of dollars to see how we could quickly get the supply and demand spooled up in that city. And what we would see is more and more success for every successive new user after that. And then we got that initial, the classic smile curve of the cohorted retention, where people would come in, and as they would be on the marketplace longer, they would have more success driven by the network effects of more buyers and sellers. And we would just, rinse and repeat that approach in every city in the country. Some cities were more successful than the others for many different reasons. But we would iterate, learn, test, and learn, and then every city we would apply what we had learned from the prior cities.
That's great. Thanks for sharing with us on that.
Sure.
So I also thought it'd be interesting to, learn more about the categories because you're quite broad as far as what people can buy and sell on OfferUp.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of think about the categories when you would kind of launch in new markets?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't really complex, to be honest. Early on, we just copied what Craigslist categories were for buying and selling goods. It's holistic. So, there were some things that we didn't have, jobs in real estate, but if something was tangible and you could buy it, you could buy it on OfferUp. We started to pull back on certain things like the pets category early on. You could buy and sell pets on OfferUp, and then we quickly realized that that's a controversial category for many reasons that we learned that we didn't know before. So we pulled back on that. But for the most part, with the same categories that we had 8 years ago are the categories that we have today. The benefit of a horizontal marketplace is that it can pull people in for one reason and then keep you for many other reasons. So we can get you to come in and find a great deal on a used couch. And then because of the variety of the inventory, you'll see as a buyer that there's anything and everything that you can buy. And then what that does is that gives you more reasons to come back and gives us a high repeat rate and strong retention.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really great point. I know there's quite a few product and goods marketplaces here in specific niches where they're constantly kind of, we're discussing that. So.
Yeah. Frankly, it's hard there are certain categories that are hard to create repeat usage if they're less frequent purchase. Like if you're buying a furniture as a consumer, used furniture, you're probably not going to come back to the same app over and over. But if you buy furniture on OfferUp and then you realize you can buy clothes, phones, cars, etc., you'll continue to be there because you're always buying something. So we'll be top of mind when you do want to buy used furniture in the future. And that's really one of the advantages of being horizontal like we are.
Yeah, certainly. So I would say, from the product side and your kind of experience there with growth, what are some ways you can kind of think about increasing that kind of repeat purchase and kind of engagement?
Yeah. I mean, the way we look at it is we look at the new user funnel and then different segments of returning users to understand really their usage patterns. So at a high level, if you understand your customers in terms of the qualitative through talking to them, and anything you can glean from their usage as well as their actual usage patterns, the more tailored you get to what you think their intents are, the more likely you can provide an experience that increases the likelihood that they return. So the deeper we go into getting to understand from a usage basis and responding to what people are doing as a new user, what categories they're going into right off the bat, the better we can tailor the experience to put the right items in front of them. And then conversely, sellers benefit from that as well. But you'll hear the theme from me is most of the time we're optimizing for a buyer experience because a seller always benefits from that as well. And then as people are using the app over time, we know what they're buying, we know what they're interested in, we know what they're browsing and looking for. So the better we can get at finding something relevant for them and telling them that something relevant is there for them, the more likely they come back and convert. So it's really not that complicated from an explanation standpoint. The execution part is complicated for sure, and it's something we're always trying to get better at.
Yeah, certainly easier said than done, right?
Yeah, always.
Yeah. One thing I did want to bring up too is you guys, I believe, are a mobile first marketplace still, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Kind of early on, were there kind of any unique challenges, I would say, with being mobile first and not being able to kind of, leverage like SEO from desktop that a lot of marketplaces typically do?
Yeah, for sure. It was, but first of all, it was our differentiator because back then Craigslist was the other alternative and it was desktop only. So we're lucky in how OfferUp was lucky because Craigslist basically ignored mobile. And now they have their own mobile app, but for many years they would let third parties create mobile apps on top of Craigslist because they didn't really care. They were making so much money and happy to operate as is on desktop that was the opening for us to create a mobile experience with user profiles that engendered trust. We did things like invested in some programs where we would allow people to upload their identification to create kind of another level of profile trust for buyers and sellers. And so that was an opening for us. So mobile was the advantage that we had. And the proliferation of apps at that point in time, and people using apps, and frankly, not as many alternatives for people to entertain themselves on the phone, were all reasons why we were able to grow really fast early on, under the radar as well. We didn't want people to copy us, to take advantage of that point in time. It's not something we could replicate in today's world.
Yeah, certainly. You actually brought up a point that I wanted to discuss, which was, trust, right? As a marketplace. And I was doing some research for the chat, and I actually noticed that you guys mentioned that you have, I believe, over 1,600 community meetup spots.
Yeah.
And also run, I believe it's the Safe Trade Spots, which is like a listing directory of
That's
the
right.
spots.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's one of the initiatives that we implemented early on, to try to help people who are uncomfortable meeting down the street or in their neighborhood or at their house, which still happens the majority of the time. Give people a place that are at police stations that they can where they can transact in a very safe manner. We want people to use them more in these types of marketplaces. You do see things that happen where there's violence at meetup spots. It's a very, very small percentage of the time. And so we try to provide the safest way for people to transact when we can.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'd like to move into talking a little bit about your role right now and kind of like the day-to-day as a chief growth officer. So what is it like as a chief growth officer? What is the day like at OfferUp?
Yeah, let's see. So my teams I have today. So marketing, which is user acquisition, user engagement. So full life cycle, and brand, PR, everything you would expect in marketing. Then we have business operations, who are analysts, managers, who help people understand how the entire marketplace works. And if you combine biz ops and marketing, that's really the engine for my team in terms of understanding growth. So we also have customer care as well, another component of that, servicing the customer. So in a day for me is to wake up and understand what the metrics look like the day before, see what types of trends popped out, if they did or not. Try to understand if anything's broken. First of all, that's usually my nature. Let's make sure nothing's broken, and then check in on how we're doing in terms of initiatives and tests, seeing if we're moving the right metrics that we're intending to move. And that really depends on what our priorities are at the time. So right now, one of our priorities is to improve what we call user engagement, and that's a buy-side metric to get the right items in front of the right people. So we have all kinds of experiments running at that point in time. So I'm checking in on how are those going, what are the next steps, etc. Other aspects, as a member of the C-level team for OfferUp these days, planning is a big component of what we're doing for next year. So working on our strategy plan for next year in conjunction with the rest of the team, putting together the deck, my parts of the deck for our board meeting, where we're going to have our strategy plan and budget approved for next year. Hiring, always looking to hire, trying to understand where we need to, what parts of the team I need to help with, helping people with their careers, understanding where people are going, trying to understand what the latest trends are with my teams. As you can imagine, with lots of people moving teams in and out of the company, people wanting to move laterally within the company this time of year, and given the environment right now, that's top of mind. Going to our weekly business reviews. That's actually today after this meeting. Monthly business reviews, talking about how we're going to operate the business different next year, what we can do to get better. So that's today. That's this week.
It sounds like
luckily I have the rest of the week off after today, but yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like quite the day. So I appreciate taking the time to join us in for sure.
Yeah.
So you did mention metrics. So, what are some of those kind of metrics that you focus on? And then I did want to dig a little bit deeper. You also mentioned kind of buy side metrics and experiments. So I'd love to kind of learn more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we take a funnel approach to our metrics from understanding the health across in the entire funnel. And it's really a loop. It's not really a funnel, but how are people coming in? What's their level of engagement from first session, second session, first day, second day, third day? How are we converting them to be buyers and/or sellers? What are their retention rates look like on a cohorted basis over time? In aggregate, what are our conversion rates looking like for all the items that are on the platform? What are our user DAU, MAU retention metrics looking like? Those are all, to me, the most important metrics that inform the health of the business from our core marketplace standpoint. And that's what we refer to our core marketplace as the local buying and selling. Of course, on top of that, we have our revenue generating businesses. We're primarily an ad driven business, but we also have a transactional business where people can ship items if they don't prefer to meet locally. So I'm looking at for the ad business, I'm looking at the click through rates on the ads. I'm looking at the CPMs that we're getting. I'm looking at the trends there. For the transactional business, I'm looking at funnel conversion rates, seeing how our shipping business is performing in terms of sellers actually shipping the items, what the conversion rate is on the different bids that we're getting. But for me, really, I'm maniacal about understanding the trends and cohort retention. I think from a growth perspective, you have to look at a business that way. That's how all investors look at businesses. And if I could give anybody any advice, if you're in growth, to be an expert in user cohorted behavior.
Awesome. That might lead to some questions here during the Q&A, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So you did mention earlier on that you were part of not only part of OfferUp since it was a team of 4, which is quite incredible to kind of think back, but that you were also involved in the fundraising process, and you guys have raised quite a bit from some pretty incredible investors. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what that journey has been like.
Yeah. So it depends on the year or the phase for OfferUp. So early on, so when I joined, we had raised I think $3 million at a $10 million pre-money valuation from Jackson Square Ventures, and that was just predicated on 500 users a month in Seattle. A guy named Josh Brainlinger, a great early marketplace investor, took a flyer on OfferUp. We used that capital to start to execute on that growth strategy in a few different cities that I referenced a little bit earlier on. And that's when things really started to take off. So we started to see, as we iterated on that approach, the adoption of OfferUp just was, it was like a dream in terms of what you would hope for in growth. People were using it. People were using it more and more. We could present the cohorted smile curves at like week 12. Usage started to accelerate as the city started to take off, and we were getting deeper and deeper into each market, and then every successive launch would get better. So that was the core of the story. No monetization at that point, but that was the core of the growth story that we raised our Series B from Andreessen Horowitz on. And that was easy. It was great. It was easy because the metrics looked so good. We had our choice of who we wanted to invest. And Nick, our CEO, his dream was to have a guy named Jeff Jordan be our first investor. And Jeff was a PayPal, eBay exec, amazing guy. We've been lucky to have him. He's been with us through thick and thin. Really, in my opinion, the best marketplace investor that there is. He's on the boards of Pinterest, Airbnb, Instacart. And so Jeff's been along with us for the ride for many, many years. After that, business kept accelerating. We still didn't have a revenue because at that point it was like take advantage of this ability to get people buying and selling locally in the face of Craigslist, and that hadn't been done before. So we kept doing that, and then we raised the next round from the Tiger Globals, T. Rowe Price, the Cotus of the world, all the crossovers. That was in 2015. That was also really easy. We didn't even have to leave our office. They came to us. That's what happens when your numbers are growing like crazy and you're the hot that everybody's whispering about you in the valley. After that, it got harder because we started to have competition out there, and we hadn't at that point proven out a revenue model. So at that point, we had Let Go was launched by Naspers, and they started spending hundreds of millions of dollars in TV. Facebook Marketplace launched. Growth was pretty slow there for the first couple of years, but just that as a threat made things harder. So at that point, we were able to continue to raise. I actually missed a round in between. We had Warburg Pincus was there as well, just after the Tiger and T. Rowe round. But after that was when it became harder. So we didn't have a revenue model. We didn't have, and growth had kind of slowed down a little bit. So, and that's the toughest time. Like that's the depressing time. It's like, is the company going to go under? I mean, it wasn't going to go under, but it doesn't, that doesn't feel good. So we really had to bear down and really start to experiment with different revenue models. We failed a bunch. We tried to invent a way for people to buy and sell locally and transact on your phone through an escrow system. We couldn't get that off the ground. We tried some early basic classified approaches that started to work, but that was really hard. So the fundraising got hard in those years, and then we started to get some traction on the advertising side, which allowed us to monetize and start to self-fund a little bit. And then after the course of many conversations, we ended up doing an acquisition of Let Go, which was our big standalone competitor outside of Facebook at that point in time. So we acquired Let Go, and then Naspers, their parent company, put in $100 million, and we signed the deal like February 2020, right before COVID hit. And then we thought the deal was going to die. Our business, nobody used OfferUp for a month. And then after that, things accelerated at rates of growth that we'd never seen before, like 50% overnight. We closed the deal. We continued to invest in the business and just hold on for dear life. So fast forward to today, our advertising business has started to really develop into a business that we can scale for many years and scale at significant size. The users continued to grow, and we have a strong team. So it's been an exciting ride, but like lots of ups and downs. And the fundraising is always tough because you have all these people that are at the home base who know you're out fundraising, and they see that you're gone. But they don't really know that we're out there, and oh man, it's hard because you don't want to make them feel bad because you're responsible for their livelihoods. But that was the reality for a few years there. So lots of ups and downs.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it, and it's actually cool to hear about Josh. From back in the early days, he was actually a previous group chat guest, and he's great. So
awesome. Yeah, Josh is great.
Yeah. So we're going to jump into questions here in a second. But you have some pretty incredible experience. And I wanted to just learn from, get a little bit more from you. Do you have any kind of tips that you might like to share with us as early stage marketplace? I would say probably founders here, thinking about growth.
Yeah, I mean, know your customer and know your product analytics. And I'm talking about consumer marketplaces. Understand, like in maniacal detail, what your customers are doing and experiencing, and where they're experiencing friction. So, OfferUp's mantra for a product has always been simplicity and reducing friction. If you don't understand exactly where your customers are dropping off when they go to your website for the first time or when they download your app, you aren't going to be able to make good decisions to optimize that experience to keep customers around. And then understand things. For me, you have to understand things on a cohorted basis, whether it's hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. That's the language of business success for marketplaces. And that's how you need to be able to understand your business so that you can operate it, make good decisions, and also communicate externally how it's going to perform in the future.
Awesome. That's great. Hey, Tomas, do you want to jump on?
Yep, sure thing. Thanks, Mike. Cool. Well, Ian, definitely appreciate you taking the time to connect, given everything on your plate, that you were sharing today and this week. So super, insightful, and really appreciate the conversation. One of the things I wanted to get your thoughts on is, earlier you were talking about that early strategy of going horizontal versus vertical, and how at the beginning that was a pretty challenging strategy to run with. And as you guys have proven it out, you've been able to see the value there. One of the questions I have is, given that you are a horizontal marketplace and there are so many like vertical only players that are coming up, like how do you guys think about your relationship with vertical marketplaces, either defending against them or collaborating with them?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. So it's a advantage and it's a disadvantage for us. It's an advantage in that you can attract people for many reasons and keep them for many reasons. As time has gone on for us from a vertical standpoint, we've lost customers in certain categories because they've found better experiences that are more tailored to that vertical. In the categories like clothing, Poshmark for women's clothing. We still have massive amounts of GMV there that it would blow you away in terms of the overall dollar amount, but it's not a revenue generating business like it is on Poshmark, and Poshmark's gone so much deeper there. That's an opportunity for us to improve our experience, to bring it up to what customers' expectations are. So that we can win back some of those customers. Same thing with things like StockX or shoes and those types of shoes in particular, where it's collectibles and they've created a verticalized experience that I'm not sure we could ever compete with, but we could add components of it to make it better. And particularly for items for us, because we're a local marketplace, verticals where there's the option A is to have an item shipped. That's a little harder for us because the customer paradigm for OfferUp is buy something locally and go meet someone somewhere. So it's easier for us to defend things like furniture or bigger items where a vertical experience is going to be much harder to create and retain users. So we also look at opportunities to partner with people in these verticals as well. We're always kicking around those ideas. You can only do so many things at one time, as you can imagine. Since we're a horizontal marketplace with so many verticals, you can come up with a bunch of different partnerships. But for us, focusing on a few main metrics that we want to move is really our strategy. When we haven't been as successful, we've been trying to do too many things at one time.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Awesome. That was a great question. Hey, Amanda, do you want to jump on?
Yeah. Hey, Ian, I'm Amanda. I'm the CEO of Jawa. It's a vertical marketplace for PC gamers, so selling PC parts and full builds. And I appreciate the context and insight around like proving out revenue. And it's something I'm thinking about now. We're super early on. We launched our beta in mid-August, but I guess knowing what you know now, do you have advice on like when and how you would like recommend we go about proving take rate? Like going through the experience. Yeah. Would you do it the same way? Would you start earlier? Would love to hear how you think about it.
Do you have a take rate today?
No. So during beta, we have no take rate.
Yeah.
And in our model, we are starting, the plan is to implement it in 2022. And I have a lot of January, and I have just a lot of anxiety around what that's going to do to our early growth. But it also feels important to prove out. Yeah,
definitely. I've been around a lot of businesses that were based on free to start with, and then tried to implement or pivot to some type of monetization the core experience later on. And that's really hard because right now you're acquiring customers who establish a relationship with Jawa in terms of free. And then later on, if you're going to introduce something where they all of a sudden they have to pay, it's going to be frustrating for them. So my advice, it would always be to start early on with some type of take rate if you're going to be a take rate driven business, so that you get these early customers who are always the most valuable customers. They're the ones who tell everybody about OfferUp, or sorry, about your product. If you change the game on them later, you risk losing them for good. So, without understanding your business really well, and from my experience, I would make sure there's some degree of take rate early on, because going from 0 to 1 on take rate is the biggest hurdle. And the later you push that off, the bigger revolt you're going to get from customers. Now we're advertising based. We've tried to implement take rate unsuccessfully for those, I think for those same reasons. People the paradigm or the understanding of OfferUp was free, and that's what people are telling their friends. Hey, you can check out this couch I got on OfferUp, it was great, or check out this couch I sold and it didn't cost me anything. That worked, and then when we tried to say, hey, pay us 7% and we'll here through our payments experience, didn't work. So you can go free forever, but if your value prop is free and then you try to change that, things could change. So my advice would be to test take rate early if that's your only business model.
Thank you.
That's a great question. So we have a question here in the chat. I think Fakay, he's stuck in traffic, but he wanted to ask about how your view on brand versus performance marketing has changed over the years. And more specifically, what a reasonable kind of expected allocation of your marketing budget and spend on each.
Yeah, definitely. It depends on the life cycle of your company. So for us early on, brand, we were all performance. We were 100% performance because it was what was scaling the business. And there's benefits of brand in your performance marketing. Usually there's less benefits of performance in your brand marketing on a directly measurable basis. So at some point in terms of your scale that's unique to your business, I'm not sure what your business is, you have to start to invest in brand to start to create the awareness and top of mind. Over time, early on, we were spending a lot in performance and we were getting the benefit of brand, and then we would add a little bit of brand to it, and that worked well. Once we started to pull back in performance and time went by, the awareness of your brand starts to decay, and then you're in a spot where it's harder and harder to grow. So I think you want to be really thoughtful about how you're trying to create awareness through brand in conjunction with performance, depending on the life cycle of your company. I know that's not very helpful but I don't understand your unique situation. It's really dependent on the situation.
Are you able to hear me right now?
Yep. Yes.
Cool. Well, thanks for answering that, Ian. So as Mike mentioned, stuck in traffic. That's actually very interesting. I would always assume, actually, counterintuitively, that you would spend more on brand early on to build the brand, I guess. But I guess what you're saying makes sense because you can target the right people and just kind of get performance early on through the channels we have today. What I'm curious about now, though, is what about channels like influencer marketing? Like, do you see that as something that is that a brand channel for you guys? And do you think that it will ever become a performance channel? Like, I think that's a lot of what we do, actually, like trying to figure that out. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that before I tell you what I do, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what your intent is, and that we're a horizontal marketplace trying to attract a bunch of people. So brand is starting to make more sense for us. Whereas if you're a vertical or you're going after a niche audience, where you need to be super targeted, brand can be a little harder to execute on, and it definitely is harder to measure. Like I said, you can get brand benefit from performance marketing if you manage the creative and the messaging in the right way. And from a growth standpoint, early on, you're always trying to measure ROI on this type of investment. Marketing at scale, or marketing brand at scale, is something that, in my experience, takes some pretty significant dollars to see the benefit. So if you're doing the quote unquote brand marketing, where you're trying just to increase awareness, if you're spending small amounts, it's just really hard to measure. And maybe that's a deficiency I have. I'm always looking to measure something and understand it. But with brand marketing, there's always a part of it is you have to believe X, but I'm always looking to measure.
Yeah, so let me give you some context. So I used to work at Airbnb doing host acquisition, basically the affiliates team. And, our team kind of grew from being affiliate to being partnership marketing. So we were doing things like podcasts and influencers and third-party email and advertising, all as a performance channel. Yeah. And, those are a lot more kind of obviously high-touch, cross-functional, more than just affiliate, right? And so our team needed an agency and we felt like the agency we worked with wasn't kind of like built for this next, this partner marketing idea. And so I left, started a Hamster Garage, and Airbnb was our first client. And so now we run a partner programs for brands like Airbnb, Canva, Turo, Truebill, a bunch of really high growth VC-backed brands. And so I'm always, I think it's very interesting. I've been doing this for 2-3 years now. It's so interesting to hear kind of different people's take on affiliates, and then seeing all the changes in the space from again, like at Airbnb, we were trying to make influencers work as a performance channel, and we've tried that for other brands too. It's really hard to do, right? But I think if things are moving in that direction, and on that, we actually just acquired an influencer marketplace called Swipe House, and it's basically a marketplace where a bunch of creators on there, and they can apply to promote brands. It's basically started by these 2 Harvard dropouts, and they were trying to build a social network for creators, and they failed in doing that. But in the process, they had all these creators, and they added a brand deal section. So the supply is actually kind of viral in terms of acquisition, because people are adding their friends and their all these tactics that are social, but then the actual business model is a marketplace. So that's like our attempt at being like, okay, well, is there a way to scale this idea of, turning influencers into a performance channel? And it's like super early. Like, we bought this and it's pretty much a seed stage product. But, I was curious to hear like your thoughts on, that brand versus performance, because that's something that I think about a lot, because, there's a blending at some level for sure. But I think a lot of those brand channels are becoming performance channels in today's world.
Yeah, for sure. What's your question?
No, I think you answered it early on. Just kind of that. I was always curious about how brands think about performance versus brand throughout the journey, and so I think kind of hearing that makes sense. And I think the part I'm still curious about is like today, given the stage you guys are at, like is some of your marketing, your brand versus performance budget, is it kind of like 80-20, or is it like 10-90, or is it no, it's 50-50?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's all performance. Next year, we're looking at definitely allocating a bit more to brand across, digital and TV. It's a hypothesis we're going to test to try to understand if we can kind of lift all boats in the rising tide saying, to see what type of impact we could make. But given where we are in terms of size and scale, like that's the type of movement we need to see to drive to get our customer base to grow significantly. We should be able to see it. That was what I was referencing in terms of needing to spend significant dollars to see that move. And what time that moves.
So does that mean that, like, let's say you spend $100 million on brand next year, like, how do you test if that was worth it? Is it like you test like conversion rates across performance as like a byproduct of that brand? Is that like a key way of testing the efficiency of it?
Yeah, yeah, our plan, the way we're thinking about it, is since we're local, so we're going to test locally in a few different cities to see what the impact is going to be. That's a way to kind of hedge the having to go. We're not going to spend $100 million, but we're going to. The plan is to get in the position where if we spend significant dollars, we do understand what the overall impact is on the different cities' growth, and then not obviously, but then extrapolate that to what larger spend could be. Since in the end, we're trying to grow each city. If you're trying to spend significant dollars, national CPMs are just so much cheaper. We would spend that way, but we'll test and learn by spending locally to understand impact.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I have one last question, and then I'll stop talking. How do you think about the affiliate channel?
So affiliate channels work great when there's a rev share or a way to easily share monetization. We're an ad model, and we have kind of some indirect monetization of things. So it's not it doesn't really work for us. We don't have a take rate. We're monetizing people through our ad platform where advertisers can target our users to get in front of them. So It doesn't really work for us. We've thought about it as a kind of an acquisition channel and just kind of doing that math on our end and throwing out flat CPIs or CPAs or CPIs. But it's not something we pursue, just given our business model is a little bit different.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks, Ian. Hey, so I actually had a question for you myself. So you did mention that you have, or you introduced shipping, right? So being the primary kind of component of the marketplace is being a local marketplace. How did you think about introducing the shipping, and then how did that kind of maybe even also kind of change how you marketed it?
Yeah, I mean, we introduced that many years ago, and the idea there was to create some incrementality for the supply and demand to help supply that's in markets where there might not be as much demand, like a smaller market, expose their items nationally. And then conversely, if a buyer is in an area where there isn't as much supply, allow them to see supply nationally. And that works for sure. It is a different experience for the users because we do have a take rate there, and you transact on our platform, and you ship the item through with a shipping label that we send you. It works pretty well, and it works at points in time. Like, for example, or during COVID when retail was shut down, it grew like crazy. But it's not the core use case for OfferUp. We think about in the future potentially ways to create that more verticalized experience that meets customer expectations in things like clothing or shoes or electronics, and then leverage that shipping capability you have right now. But that's the future. That's not really what we have today. It kind of goes to that. It's an experience that's it doesn't meet the pure expectations of what people have when they come in to use OfferUp as the local marketplace.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us on that. Cool. So I think we have time for one more question. Tomas, did you want to jump back on?
Yeah, sure thing. So actually would love to kind of double down on or follow up with exactly the point we were just raising, where earlier you were mentioning that, there are some, examples of partnerships with vertical marketplaces. And I would love to know what some of those examples look like. And ask because I am building an early stage marketplace vertical for secondhand outdoor goods or outdoor gear.
Yeah. For the way we've thought about it is we do have a platform where we've experimented with bringing on third parties inventory and then exposing that to our users in a smart way where it's relevant to them. They can have it shipped to them. We're still trying to kind of figure that out. We actually did a bunch of deals with channel advisor partners last year to kind of test that hypothesis. We pulled back a little bit on it just because we're focusing more on local. But the idea for us there is the potential is always ways to bring in relevant inventory that is aligned with kind of customers' expectations. So if it's used something or pre-owned something that people are looking for on OfferUp, and if we can amplify our supply with a partnership, we're open to those types of ideas.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Awesome. That was a great question. It sounds like, you've definitely had quite the experience, with OfferUp. So is there one memorable moment that stands out, throughout the years there?
Huh. I mean, there's lots of memorable moments. I'd just say generally early on, the memorable moment was when we were, when there was, I think maybe like 10 of us, and OfferUp was growing like crazy every day. I'd wake up early in the morning and check the stats, and the metrics were going up like crazy, and we weren't telling anyone. Andreessen Horowitz had invested in us, but we asked them not to do any press. So it was the best feeling because we had this secret that nobody knew about, and we knew our customers loved OfferUp, but nobody outside of OfferUp really knew or cared about it from a financial or investor standpoint. And that felt great because it was all about the satisfaction of building something for customers that was changing their lives. So to me, that's the best memory. And then, in general, just meeting and being able to work with all different types of people, and the relationships I built with the people along the way is the other general memory. But the early days were amazing, and I appreciated them at the time, but I appreciate them now even more in retrospect.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So, well, this is a really incredible chat, and we're definitely all huge fans of what you and the team have built. So, congrats on where you're at. Before we wrap it up, though, time for a quick plug. Where can we keep up with you at?
I'm not super active on social or anything like that. I don't post anything on social, so you can't really keep up with me anywhere other than on LinkedIn. If you ever want to connect one-on-one or talk about anything, I get a lot of energy talking to people outside of the people I talk to on a day-to-day basis, because passion from entrepreneurs like yourselves who are trying to build is super inspiring to me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Yeah, this is definitely super inspiring for us too on our end. So we really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for the questions.